Jimbo Stereo here with Road Radio USA. Welcome to the Proactive Prevention Podcast, where we explore critical issues in substance abuse prevention, community well-being too. Today we are honored to welcome retired Judge Mark Lovecchio, a longtime advocate for justice, addiction recovery, and systematic reform. During his 12 years on the bench, Judge Lovecchio took a human-centered approach to the legal system, often stepping down from the bench to engage with defendants directly in an effort to break the cycle of addiction and crime. However, his growing frustration with the limitations of the criminal justice system, mainly the lack of resources for addiction recovery and mental health support, led him to step away from the bench in search of new ways to effect change. In this episode, we'll discuss Judge Lovecchio's unique perspective on addiction, the justice system, and what can be done to better support individuals struggling with substance abuse. Thank you, Mark, for today's Road Radio USA podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Okay. Judge, before we move on here now, tell us a little bit about your career.
Oh, that's a good question. I've been practicing law since 1984.
Okay.
I practiced law in Pittsburgh for about 3 or 4 years. Moved here to Williamsport with my wife, who was from here originally. We moved here because for personal reasons, her father had been ill. So we decided to move here and decided to just continue our practice of law here in Williamsport.
Okay.
I practiced at my own law firm, Campana and Lovecchio, until about 2009. And in 2009, I was elected as a judge here in Lycoming County, and I served on the bench for 10 years, and then I was retained. And I served on the bench for another 2 or 3 years before I retired, and then I went back to the practice of law. And so now I'm at McCormick. It's actually a unique situation. I'm at 2 law firms.
Okay.
I'm at McCormick Law Firm, where we do a lot of civil work, some labor and employment law and things of that sort. And then I'm also just started a law firm with my son, wife, brother-in-law, and maybe brother.
Wow.
It depends, yes.
Okay.
And we're concentrating in criminal law and family law, as well as mediations and arbitrations.
Okay, wow. So what initially drove you to pursue law?
Great question. Some people, it's their life's calling. For me, it was kind of by default, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
When I graduated from college, I actually wanted to go into the FBI, but I was born blind in my right eye. And when they found that out, they said, well, we're not going to allow you to be an agent because of your disability. And so I said, well, I didn't know what I was going to do. So I figured I'd go to law school because I didn't know what else to do.
Okay.
But then when I went to law school, I found kind of like a calling. And, ever since I've used it as a platform to address some of the social issues that I thought we face as a community.
Great to know. Now, during your 12 years on the bench, what has been some of your most rewarding?
Changing people's lives.
Okay.
It wasn't unusual for people to come up to me years after they might have been in front of me and thank me. That was very rewarding. At first, when it first happened to me, I was a little bit afraid. I thought this big guy was coming up to me and goes, Judge, and I thought, oh my gosh, what did I do? What made this guy so mad?
Okay.
But he came up and hugged me. He said, thanks, you helped save my life.
Wow.
There are a lot of things about being a judge that are not so sexy, for lack of a better word. But what I really found rewarding was in the criminal realm, dealing with, and in the what we'll call the children delinquency issues, which are crimes that you would commit as a juvenile. Mm-hmm. Dealing with those individuals and trying to help them, steer them into doing the right things.
Okay. Well, that's what we're speaking about here right now because of the DUI situation with Road Radio USA. Can you get into more of the DUI situation right now?
Sure. Terrible problem. And it was strange, but after a while, I became so disenchanted with what we were doing and how we were dealing with DUI offenses. I made it kind of my purpose to educate some of the other people involved in the legal system and to make some changes. For example, we started a DUI treatment court. Judge Butts was instrumental in that. We started an underage drinking court. We started sending people to treatment in lieu of incarceration. We started sending people to do community service, to do in-home detention in lieu of incarceration. We found, there was actually, I found a publication out of western part of the country that was entitled "The Hardcore Prosecutor's Guide to Dealing with DUI Offenses," and their recommendations were pretty much consistent with what we were doing here, which I think made a difference. The problem is with especially alcohol use, society to some extent condones it.
Okay.
And what's the matter with having a little drink with your son? Or let's oh, come on, honey, you can have some of your friends over, and as long as we're here. But the reality is, it's a deadly, deadly disease, and the reality is that it catches up with people before they even know it, and the next thing you know, they're hurting themselves or hurting someone else.
Okay. Very good to know. So is it a big situation in Lycoming County, those kind of situations?
I think so, but I don't think we're unique. I think it's big throughout the state. I was actively involved in the state. I was educator of judges. I became involved in the criminal law committee. I actually became an officer of the Pennsylvania State Judges Association. And so I was active in educating judges, and we would not lots of times compare. You don't like to, but the DUI situation is significant all over.
Okay.
They deal with it differently in different counties. We're kind of lucky here in Lycoming County because we're small enough that we can pool all of our resources together and help people. Versus bigger counties, it's more like a assembly line.
Right. Now, we talked about the alcohol situation here in Lycoming County. Tell us about the tell us more about the drug, fentanyl and things like that. What do you know about that as far as that and driving and all that other kind of stuff? What is that in regards to what you know about?
I'll tell you an interesting anecdote. I was parked right at the corner of West 4th Street and Pine Street. I was coming south on Pine Street, and I was parked, and I got smashed from behind by this other car. And I got out right away, and I go back to the other car, and it's locked, and it looked like the driver was having an epileptic seizure of some kind. And what happened was the police eventually came, and we found out that he was using heroin at the time. And it is a vicious problem. The opiate problem is vicious. We became far more proactive in dealing with it. We've got the medical community involved. We've got the West Branch Drug and Alcohol involved. Judge Butts has always been a huge proponent of treatment options versus penalties. I think we have, to say we have a handle on the opiate problem is probably somewhat misleading, but we have more of a handle on it than a lot of different counties, number one.
Okay.
I was selected, this was somewhat of an honor, I was selected to be the Pennsylvania judge. Out of all of our judges, I was appointed by our Pennsylvania Chief Justice to go out to, I think we were in Reno, for a week-long seminar. They had a judge from each state, and the purpose was to educate us and so we could go back and educate the judges in our state about how to handle these problems. And
that's something.
Yeah, well, I actually found out that I knew a lot more than a lot of the other judges because we were really proactive here in Lycoming County.
Great.
Yeah.
That's definitely positive, which kind of leads me into my next question. If you were known for taking a unique, more personal approach in your courtroom, sometimes you're known for this, sometimes even stepping down from the bench to speak directly with the defendants. Now, why, I guess now you just told me, why is that important to you? It's because you were just hit from behind.
Right. Well,
so tell me more. Tell me more about this.
Well, I had a brother who overdosed and died from opiate addiction.
Wow.
Yeah, and this was in 2002.
Okay.
It was the typical scenario. He had back problems, started taking pills, ended up not getting his pills, ended up going out on the street to get pills, ended up going out on the street to get opiates, other kinds of opiates, and dealing with him on a personal level was very, very difficult. And that was before I became a judge.
Okay.
I'll never forget when we have a big family. My family had 6 children, and obviously both of our parents. And it was very interesting because I was kind of the centerpiece in dealing with the different family members with respect to my brother.
Okay.
He ended up moving here and living with me for a little bit, trying to help him. But I remember when he passed saying to myself, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to try and address this issue. Okay. So it was personal and professional, because professionally I saw it all the time.
Great. I mean, not great. You know what I mean?
No,
I know what you're saying.
It was good because, as a judge, I had the platform and the power to exercise that responsibility, which turned out, as I said, we were very innovative and we made a lot of, I think, strides in the community to help a lot of people.
Okay.
It starts with education. It starts with the kind of stuff you're doing, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
But then, I used to ask people, I said, why? For example, heroin. There was a couple in front of me. They were 21, 23 years old. They had 2 children, so they had children when they were young, and they were both in front of me for possession and use of some sort of opiate of some kind. I think it was heroin. So I'm trying to talk to them just about how important it is, what they need to do, why they should not do what they need to do. And they seemed to be listening, and then they came in front of me 6 months later for the same exact thing. And I tried everything I possibly could to talk to them and to educate them.
Right.
But it's tough. When I was out in Reno, we had a psychiatrist come and talk to us, and she said this. She said, okay, all of you hold your breath. Mm-hmm. We said, okay, so we held our breath. And they said, keep holding your breath if you really love your children. Keep holding your breath if you really want your job. Keep holding your breath if you don't want problems. And, of course, nobody could keep holding their breath. And she said that's what it's like for people with substance abuse disorder. They're just driven. And so it's a tough nut to crack. I had one guy come in front of me. We were talking about alcohol. One guy come in front of me. It was his 7th DUI offense. And he had just hit somebody and almost killed them. And he actually said to me, he goes, I don't have a drinking problem. I only get caught when I drink and drive. I've never been caught otherwise. Like he was the unluckiest man in the world. And said, when I'm out of prison, I'm going to continue drinking and continue, I'm not going to do anything to address my drinking because I don't really have a problem.
Right.
And I actually said to him, I said, look, you have to do us a favor, because when you're in the trenches, when you're down there talking to people one-on-one, you try to say what you need to say and do what you need to do to get them to somehow scare them, or not scared straight, that's not the right word, but somehow push them so they understand what they're doing.
Right.
And I told him, I said, look, you're going to be in jail for a long time because I think you're going to get rehabilitated. No, but we have to keep you in jail to protect the rest of us.
Right.
But when you're done, you need to do us a favor. Go buy a house in the woods, and if you want to drink yourself to death there, you can do that.
Right.
But my gosh, otherwise you're going to hurt a lot of people. But it's it's a perfect example of how so many people are just entrenched in substance use.
Boy. So what, in your opinion, what resources or changes are most needed to support individuals struggling with addiction and prevent them from returning to the crime? If you want, what's needed?
I used to ask people why.
Okay.
I used to ask people, why do you want to do this? And go back to that family, for example, I was telling you about.
Right.
The young family. And the mother said to me, well, it's exciting and it's cheap and I'm not bored anymore. And I said, well, jumping off a cliff is exciting too,
right.
but it's the hitting part that stinks.
Right.
We don't have enough opportunities for people.
Okay.
We don't have, in my opinion, you talk to kids about why they drink. Well, I'm bored. I don't have anything else to do.
Okay.
That's why I've been real active in coaching for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to teach some life lessons and try to teach these kids, be active, be involved, do things. So they're not bored. So they're not, sitting by themselves and thinking what they can do to have, the most fun. For the other people, it's almost like it takes a community. So what we do and what we've done is we've got different prongs of help. We've got West Branch Drug and Alcohol, where they're assessing people, mm-hmm. and what they're doing is giving them options for treatment in lieu of incarceration. Then we have a judicial system where what we're doing is we're placing them on probation, or we're doing what we need to do there, and then we're forcing them to do things. For example, when I gave people community service, mm-hmm. I didn't give them, I made them do something proactive. In other words, not just go out and pick up garbage from the street, mm-hmm. because then they're just going to be, it's not going to impact them at all.
Sure.
So what I said is you need to go and do something that's going to give you a skill of some kind. I said, learn to play guitar. Mm-hmm. Go help some youth team with coaching. Go help the food bank. Do something like mm-hmm. that gives people a sense of self-esteem,
right.
and a sense of purpose.
Okay. Good to know. So the addiction doesn't just, I think this is what you're talking about here with that. Addiction doesn't just impact the individual, it affects families and loved ones.
Oh.
If you're comfortable sharing, how does that addiction impact personally, and how has that shaped your perspective on the issue?
Well, when my brother passed, I remember when I first saw him, because like I said, I was kind of the center of the family. I was dealing with my parents. They would call me. I was dealing with some of my siblings hated his guts and were so mad at him for what he did. Other siblings would call me and say, how's he doing? Things like that. But I remember when we were burying him, I would cry my eyes out. And I told my wife that I'll never forgive myself because I probably should have done more.
Oh. And he was living here in South Williamsport.
He was living in Williamsport.
And they were in Pittsburgh?
He came from Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay.
We had moved back here at the time. So he was living with us here.
Oh.
He actually just showed up at my door one time.
Oh, really?
We had not seen or heard from him for a year.
Oh, okay.
And then he just showed up at my door.
Okay.
And, it is a family disease.
Oh, yeah.
The way it impacts families is... a lot of people don't appreciate that. Dr. Bauer started what's known as GRASP, Grieving Parents Who Have Lost Loved Ones, or grieving, I forget what the acronym stands for. But we would go to these meetings, and I would go, and the common theme was all these families feel regret, they feel guilt, they feel remorse, mm-hmm. They blame themselves. It takes away that person who's suffering with the substance abuse disorder is such that they take all of the energies of the entire family, mm-hmm. and there's not room for anybody else. We have 3 children now, and they're all adults, and I sometimes, my wife would get mad at me for saying this, but sometimes I say to myself, I wish I would have spent more time with them and doing things with them than I did chasing my brother around trying to find out what he was doing. I would grab my kids, put them in the car, and say, "We have to go find Uncle David."
Oh yeah.
And the impact on the family is lifelong.
Yeah.
I can't tell you the number of family members who have, who are in counseling on themselves, who go to Al-Anon meetings to try to get some support, who are in therapy, who take anxiety medication just to deal with this stuff. But it's a terrible family problem.
Okay. I need to put more of that into my show. You need to come see one of my shows and see what you think about it. It's again, here we go again. You've spoken about the lack of education and resources for mental health within the legal system. How does this issue contribute to the challenges you face as a judge now? Give me a heads up about that.
Mental health and substance abuse go together like a hand in a glove.
Okay.
They have been consistently to see people with both sets of problems. And so you have to address the mental health component. Plus, you've got to address the substance abuse component. And then you've got to address the real problems that they have in life, getting a job, getting housing,
Right.
Taking care of their children.
Then it just seems to me like they just get angry.
Yeah, right.
They get angry, and that's how I can see how that would be. So
People get angry, people get resentful.
right.
I get it to some extent. I get it that we as a society want our people to kind of take accountability for what they do.
Right.
And we want them to, step up and make the hard choices and do the hard things. But a lot of these people are incapable of doing it because of mental health issues or because of the substance abuse issue has just wreaked havoc. And I saw lots of families, mom and dad are using.
Right.
Mom and dad are in jail. Mom and dad, have been using crack, have been using heroin, have been using a big problem now is methamphetamine.
Yeah.
Which is just tears people apart.
Okay. Good to know. I'm glad you're telling me this. And what's your decision now to retire is a surprise to many. What ultimately led to you to step away from the bench, and what's next for you in your career?
Oh, that's a good question. I was talking to my wife about it for a little bit, and it was just that I felt two things. I felt that I perhaps can do more. I felt that I did enough as a judge and created enough with the other judges that we had systems in place.
Okay.
We had, we brought everybody to the table, all the stakeholders, probation, children and youth, drug and alcohol people, mental health people. We brought them all to the table, and then we have a system in place that works. But my problem was I couldn't be as open and honest about it, and I wanted to do more of that.
Okay.
I wanted to be
because you were a judge.
Right, because I was a judge, I couldn't be very critical. I had to be very careful. So I figured, now I can be a little more critical.
Sure.
And it was time. Some people say, no, that's Mark, that's silly. But let other people get their chance. I mean, I had an opportunity to make some changes, and I did.
Right.
So let's give other people a chance. And now going forward, I do things like this. I speak at events.
Good.
I'm involved. I just talked to the director of West Branch Drug and Alcohol just yesterday. She asked me to speak at another event.
Great.
And I think my past job as a judge, or my past career as a judge, gives me at least a level of respect going in. And it gives me a level of experience that a lot of people don't have.
Okay.
And now I can take the gloves off and say what we're doing wrong and what we need to do.
So now that you've transitioned into mediation, what do you hope to accomplish in this new role, and how do you see it benefiting the justice system? I think you've just answered that maybe a little bit, but go ahead, tell us.
Mediation, it concerns bringing parties together and trying to facilitate some resolution between their disputes.
Okay.
A lot of it's done in connection with civil matters, and it saves the time, energy, and resources of going to court. It gets problems resolved quickly instead of lingering forever in our justice system. When I first got off the bench, and this goes back to your one question as to why, one of the reasons why I thought that I would start to do mediation with respect to criminal cases.
Okay.
In other words, take the district attorney, take the public defender or criminal defense attorneys, sit down with them and say, what are we really after here? What do we really want?
Okay.
Take into account the interests of the victim, take into account the interests of society, take into account the interest of the individual who comes in front of. We are under the false impression that jail is the answer. Do we need people in jail? Absolutely. I can tell you that from being on the bench. There's some people in jail who need to be in jail to protect the rest of us. But there's a vast amount of people who will come out of jail worse or come out of jail no better and then go back to the same thing.
Same pattern, right?
The same exact pattern. If I told you need to do this or you'd go to jail, you would do it because you have things to lose if you go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't have anything to lose, and they figure, oh, what the heck?
Mm-hmm.
Going to jail is going to jail.
Right. Well, as a judge, you had to remain neutral on many issues. Now that you're no longer on the bench, what causes or initiatives are most passionate about or advocating for now?
What we're doing right now.
This is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
My kids. I'd say kids and substance use and abuse.
Okay.
I love connecting with kids.
Okay.
I love giving them the benefit of my experience.
Good.
I'd like to say wisdom, but they teach me just as much as I might teach them. And in dealing with substance use issues, primarily through kids, there are alternatives and
right.
There are things you need to do. There are things that you can do and should do to deal with these problems.
Tell us about, can you be specific without getting in trouble here? Can
Sure.
you tell us more?
I'm no longer a judge.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Tell us what school district and things like that did you have most trouble with and things in the county and things like that? I know Williamsport's bigger.
I know, but they all seem to be the same.
Really?
Like right now I'm coaching at South Williamsport.
Right.
And there's kids there who struggle as
really?
well as the kids. Now it's a different world. When you and I were growing up,
right.
You went to one school and maybe if you saw somebody from another school,
right.
But everybody knows everybody now.
You're right.
I've had issues with kids from Muncie. I've had issues with kids from Montgomery.
Okay.
I've had issues with kids from South. I'd like to say it's not universal, but it is.
Okay, right.
It is.
Okay.
Because they're all connected now. You see my own kids, for example, they go to parties at Montoursville. They all went to Williamsport High School.
Right.
They went to the prom in South Williamsport. But everybody knows everybody now because of social media and everything
right.
else. And if there's a party, everyone knows about it.
Let's talk about the social media now. Tell me about when you and I were growing up, there was no social media.
Thank goodness.
How about it, man?
Right. I have mixed feelings.
Okay.
I think it's really good in some ways, but it puts so much pressure on these kids because I kid my girls about it on my soccer team. I said, okay, so we're going to take a picture, and everybody, their mouths come up, and they're all smiling, and they're all happy. And then as soon as the picture's done, girls will be fighting with each other.
They get all tough with each other.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah.
And they'll start back with the drama.
Mm-hmm.
It creates a false sense of the best way to say it is the false sense that everything's perfect in other people's lives.
Right.
And so what that does is, and I've seen this on the bench, it depresses other people.
Right.
Well, they're all doing this and they're all doing that and they're all, so happy with this and happy with that, and I'm just stuck here in a low-paying job.
Right.
I don't have any future. My kids are a problem. Nobody's helping me with things.
Right.
It does put a lot of pressure on kids.
Well, I guess.
Is it a necessary evil? I don't know. I don't know.
What are your thoughts on? Tell me about being a judge and suicide. What are your thoughts with that? I mean, do kids have a lot of? Tell me about that.
It's sad. It's as I said. There's a lot. No, I'm not sure if I said this. There's a lot of hopelessness out there.
Okay.
And the hopelessness is what drives people to using and continuing to use substances so that they can get away from their hopelessness.
Right.
It looks like, unfortunately, from what I saw in dealing with the kids on the bench and from what I saw with dealing with adults, it's far more prevalent now than it used to be.
Right.
Or maybe we just know about it more. Maybe it's just more out in the open now. Mm-hmm. But it's, we're talking kids, 7th, 8th grade. We're talking kids, maybe even younger who are contemplating things like this. And just trying to, and as I said, I used my position as a judge as a platform because people had to listen to me.
Yeah.
That was the one advantage of being a judge. People had to listen to you.
Right.
And I would try to talk to them, but again, I tried to relate to them. I would come down from the bench lots of times. I would not wear my robe lots of times when we had underage drinking court, for example.
Okay.
I'd sit down with them. I'd give them my cell phone number if they need
wow.
it. I'd say, if you need a ride in the middle of the night, call me.
Okay.
I can't ignore the fact that drinking's going to happen.
Right.
So I'm kind of a risk reductionist. Mm-hmm. So what I used to tell the kids in my underage drinking court, and many of them were in college, and some were like seniors in high school.
Right.
I used to say, listen, guys, there's a difference between having a beer with your, parents and or your friend and watching a sporting event versus drinking a bottle of Jack Daniels, taking off all your clothes and running down the street.
Right.
Why do you have to do the second?
Prevention is a big theme on this podcast. From your perspective, what can community, schools, and families do to help prevent addiction and crime before it even starts?
Well, everyone's going to tell you the same thing. It starts with education. It starts with getting the problem, letting kids, young kids even, know that these problems exist, and know that they're not alone in the process, because so many people feel alone. They feel, again, it kind of goes back to the social media. Everyone else is having a great time. Everyone else has a great life, and your life sucks. Mm-hmm. That's how they feel. But I think education is huge. The things that you're doing are huge. Just getting the word out there as to this is a problem. I think it's huge having people come and speak who have struggled with those kinds of issues and who can talk about what it leads to and what, how it impacted their lives.
Okay. We
did a program up at Jersey Shore High School years ago with all the teachers in the entire school district. It was a day.
Okay.
And what we found through them is that the kids also reacted a lot to how it impacted family. And they wanted to hear from family members because they don't understand how that impacts them. And then again, it unfortunately it comes down to resources, to have them be able to go to a treatment if they need treatment, to have them go to counselors if they need counselors. So a lot in the schools, it depends upon teachers, it depends upon guidance counselors, it depends upon therapists.
Well, Mark, for those listening to this podcast, whether they're struggling with addiction or not, have a loved one or work in prevention, what words or advice or encouragement would you offer to them?
Well, I've seen a couple things in my decades of dealing with this issue. The stigma is kind of removed. So many people still think there's a stigma attached to it, but I don't know of one family that hasn't been touched by this, have an in-law or have some extended family member or a close friend, somebody who has had this issue. So it's important not to isolate. It's important to reach out And it's important to know that there are tons of people who care and tons of people who want to help you with your issues. Yes, does the person need to take the first step? Yeah, because you cannot force somebody to get help. Now, I used to think that you could by putting them in jail, but ultimately it depends upon them.
Right.
But I think what they need, my advice would be it's tough because I have a loved one right now who's struggling, and it's a sibling, and he went to treatment, and he's doing well.
Good.
But it took us years to convince him that he needed help.
Now, when you say the Pittsburgh area, is it right in the city or is it in the suburbs of Pittsburgh area?
Suburbs.
In the suburbs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The Shady Side, East Liberty area.
Okay.
Well, that's actually technically the city.
Okay.
So
just wondering, because Road Radio's done shows out there before, and I was just wondering where it was and stuff.
Yeah.
So. Well, before we wrap things up, is there anything else you'd like to add to the podcast today, Mark?
No, I want to thank you for having me. And like I said, to the extent people are listening, more people understand their dilemma than people think. And more people are willing to help them than people think. I don't know if you ever heard that story where two people are walking down, and this we use in addiction treatment and in addiction when I talk to people. Two people are walking down the beach going opposite, and all these starfish were washed up on the beach. And as he's going along, he'll pick up one starfish and throw it in. He'll pick up another starfish and throw it in. And then the guy's walking the other way and goes, I don't know what you're doing because you're never going to get all these starfish. And he picks up one and he throws it and he goes, I saved that one. Didn't I?
There you go.
And so that's what we were looking. We were looking to just save one person at a time.
Thank you. It was a good one.
Yeah. And if one person can avoid going through what a lot of people went through, then that's
what it's
a
all
win.
about.
That's a win.
That's a win. Isn't
Yeah.
it? So.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thanks for listening to the Proactive Prevention Podcast. Until next time, this is Jimbo in stereo.